Justin Skycak, welcome to the Metagame.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
You're the Chief Quant and Director of Analytics at Math Academy, which is by far the best way to learn math. I first heard about this from a previous guest, Romeo Stevens. And this conversation is not going to be about math per se, but we're going to get a lot into learning and how to actually learn skills. And I think a good anchor for where to start is the problem that Math Academy is trying to solve, which is Bloom's 2 sigma problem. So I wonder if you could tell the listeners, what is that problem and what are some of the solutions that have been tried for it?
Yeah, so Bloom's 2 sigma problem. This was coined in the 1980s by an educational psychologist named Benjamin Bloom. And there was a particular study of his that really kicked it off and framed this problem. And it was comparing the effectiveness of one-on-one tutoring versus traditional classroom teaching. And so what Bloom found was basically that the average tutored student in this study performed better than 98% of students in the traditional class. And so this is an effect size measured in standard deviations or sigmas as a 2 sigma effect size. And the idea though is like it's just a huge effect. Is it 1.5 sigmas, 2.5 sigmas? It depends on how you measure it. You're going to get different results based on who the tutors are, what's the overall context. But the idea is that there's so much learning being left on the table, a lot of human potential going unrealized. And how do we capture it? That's the 2 sigma problem. You can massively elevate student learning outcomes with properly individualized pedagogy, but society can't afford to equip every student with a human tutor. So what do you do? That's the 2 sigma problem. And so when it comes to solutions, I can start out just kind of saying how Bloom tried to solve this. So Bloom was the guy who framed this problem. And so he didn't just frame the problem, he actually had an entire research program that was, the goal was to solve this problem. And so his approach was, he hoped that the benefit of the human tutor could be captured by combining a bunch of evidence-based learning strategies, and that a tutor was kind of doing. It's like take what the human tutor does and try to have the teacher do some approximation of that in a and just as much as possible. And just compound all these things that the tutor is doing and just try to compound up to this 2 sigma effect.
But in a one-to-many context in the classroom as opposed to a one-to-one context with a tutor.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. So as you might expect, this search, like, okay, so Bloom found some strategies that were like they did seriously elevate student learning outcomes, like mastery learning, for instance. I think depending on how you measured that, what context you can get like a one. I think Bloom reported a 1 sigma effect in his study. Other studies have reported like a 0.5 sigma effect. Either way, it's a huge gain, but it's not the whole thing. And so Bloom was compounding a lot of these other kind of strategies, trying to turn all the levers possible for a single teacher with many students.
And mastery learning is just making sure people nail the prerequisites before moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Which it's one of those things like you would think like, oh, isn't that just learning? Like that's what else would you do? But this is violated so often in the classroom, and it's violated often. It's not because the teacher is just like walking in and being like, hey, you guys don't know anything about math. Let's solve integral. No. It's what happens is like each student comes in with a wildly different knowledge profile. And unless you are trying to like measure like what each student individually knows and figure out what the whole class knows, like chances are if you choose a problem that feels like it should be appropriate for students entering a class, it's probably not going to be appropriate for most of the class, because they're all going to have missing foundational knowledge in different areas. And anyway, so Bloom kind of his approach with master learning was to do this more systematically, where the human teacher was like intentionally, just carefully trying to find the overlap of the student knowledge profiles as much as possible, and make sure the class master these prerequisites before going on to more advanced material. But it's a kind of spectrum. Like there's an attempt at mastery learning for the whole class, and then there's like actual true mastery learning, which is like completely individualized to a particular student. And the closer you get to this platonic ideal of mastery learning, the better the learning, the greater the increase in learning you're going to get. So basically the problem was like, so Bloom restricted his search space to strategies that could be implemented manually by a single human teacher and many students. And so he was kind of like checking the box on a lot of the really important stuff that you're supposed to be doing if you want to maximize learning outcomes. But it's just, he wasn't able to push this stuff to the fullest extent of individualization that you'd get with the one-on-one tutor. And so I think, at least to me, that seems like that was sort of the fatal flaw. Now his approach, like, it did increase, like he was able to increase learning outcomes a lot by compounding these strategies, but it didn't get all the way up to this like 2 Sigma and personal tutor effect. So it's like he said an incredible shoot for the moon, land among the stars kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's basically the inspiration for Math Academy. Let's take all these evidence-based learning strategies and let's actually remove the constraint that you have to be implementing these things manually, one teacher with 30 students, and let's just implement this programmatically in the computer and try to individualize as much as we can as possible for every individual student's knowledge profile. And so that's just been what I and Math Academy have been working on for the past like decade or so. That's been our entire purpose for existing, is to try to construct a solution to the 2 Sigma problem that no longer takes the one human teacher as a constraint, and it removes that constraint. Just let's see how much of this we can code up into a system that does this all automatically.
Yeah, and we can do that now because of computers and AI and modeling people's forgetting curves and making it extremely individualized at scale. And Bloom didn't have access to that kind of technology, so he had to solve the scale problem manually, which was teaching a classroom.
Exactly. Yeah, Bloom was doing this back in the 80s, and like you think of computers back in the 80s were just like bricks, right? Gigantic. Like you didn't. I can't remember like what the stats are and how many schools had computers and stuff, but like kids were not walking around with their Chromebooks like they are nowadays. Like, compute power was so limited. It's taken a while for technology to catch up. Yeah.
So whenever there's a field where there's a bunch of value being left on the table, or there's like a very small subset of people who seem to be succeeding in it, but most people aren't, I assume there's like a bitter pill somewhere that most people aren't willing to take. Like there's just some kind of difficult, sobering truth. And my sense is with the 2 Sigma problem and learning in general, the bitter pill has something to do with this idea of deliberate practice. Because from what I gather, this is like Erickson's research, deliberate practice is the most evidence-based learning technique for getting good at anything. And by definition, it's hard. And so first, do you accept that premise that deliberate practice is kind of like, the core bitter pill here? And then maybe you can give a better definition on what it is for the listeners.
So efficient learning, it's kind of like it should feel like exercise, and most people don't want their learning experiences to feel like exercise, and so when I say it feels like exercise, right, it kind of comes down to deliberate practice, which is just to name a handful of features of deliberate practice off the top of my head. The tasks that you need to be working on, they need to be right at the edge of your ability. Deliberate practice is all about like working at the edge of your ability and pushing that ability forward. So it's like you don't want to be just like doing the stuff that's easy over and over, even though that's the most comfortable stuff. You have to be like actually straining, because that's kind of the point, is to strain, and then your body, or in this case, your brain, which is part of your body, but it adapts to overcome this challenge that's been presented. And so the idea is that you're putting strain on your body. Your body is adapting to that strain, and the strain becomes less straining, and then so you up the strain by doing even more challenging things, and then you just continue pushing yourself forward. And now, of course, this is unpleasant. There's a lot of studies into deliberate practice where they find that like expert performers do not feel like pleasant during straining. It's not a feeling of like, wow, this is very nice, a pleasant experience. Like, no. It's satisfying after the fact, and like like the feeling of overcoming a challenge is satisfying, but like your body does not feel pleasant. This is not a massage on your brain. Like you watch a YouTube video and like you're feeling like dopamine hits from all the cool images about math and stuff. Like, that's not deliberate practice. And right, and so yeah, so many people just don't want their learning to feel like that, even though that is the most efficient way. I mean, so that's one side. Another side where people often get this wrong is they try to take on things that are too challenging. You can, right. It's sort of like a balance. You need to be working at things that are right at your level. Because if you go too challenging, that's like, I mean, it's kind of like walking into the gym and then trying to pick up put 500 pounds on the barbell and try to pick it up, even though you can only pick up 200 pounds, and you're just like straining the whole time. It never budges. Like the challenge, it only helps you to train on a challenge that you can overcome. That's the key, that you have to be able to overcome it too. So it's like it's sort of like the middle way to deliberate practice, and there's failure modes on both sides of it.
Yeah, and it seems like the hard part, in addition to the effort, is setting up the conditions so that you're always at this frontier, this like training effect frontier.
Yeah.
Without it being so effortful that it's demoralizing or difficult, like too difficult to overcome. And that seems like a very complicated problem for like, I guess depending on the domain. I think in fitness and bodybuilding, it's progressive overload. It's like a pretty straightforward thing. And yeah, I think when it comes to something like math, where you have so many different aspects to it that have dependencies, and even knowing where you're at, like I think this is one of the issues where people don't even know what they don't know. It's a much more complicated problem. And I think one solution to that is this idea of a knowledge graph, which from my understanding is basically like a skill tree, like in a video game, where but more complex, where there's all these like dependencies. What is the role of the knowledge graph when it comes to finding that deliberate practice frontier?
Yeah, the knowledge graph is super important, because it just provides a way to sort of organize information about what a student knows and what they don't know. And so right, it's sort of like you can think all the stuff that we're talking about, it becomes very like, you can think about it visually, physically, when you overlay it on a knowledge graph. So there's this idea of like a student's knowledge frontier. Like, okay, that's kind of like an abstract thing, like the edge of their knowledge. Like this is like, put their knowledge on a knowledge graph, where you've got all the topics linked up. This is a prerequisite of that. That's a prerequisite of that. This forms a directed acyclic graph. It looks kind of like a tree, and then you can trace out their knowledge frontier. They have this cohesive body of knowledge, and then they have things that they don't know. There's not like holes in their knowledge profile so much as a jagged knowledge profile. And there's two bodies, and the boundary between them is their their edge of mastery. So the knowledge profile essentially becomes the way of bookkeeping everything that's going on. What have they done? What do they need to work on? How recently have they done everything? And especially with math or any kind of skill tree in general, you often get implicit review. Whenever you learn a new thing, you're often reviewing or implicitly practicing sub skills that are implicated in that new thing. So, you might think like if you're solving like a quadratic equation by factoring, then you're also going to get implicit sub skills on factoring quadratic, solving the linear equations that emerge. If you solve a two-step linear equation, you're going to get implicit practice on solving a one-step, because to solve a two-step, you have to transform it into a one-step. If you're doing algebra with fractions, solving a linear equation with fractional numbers in, you're getting your implicit review on fraction arithmetic. And so if you want to track all this stuff, if you really want to optimize the learning process, you have to track all of this credit that's flowing through the graph. I'm like, okay, you learned this, you need to review it at some point in the future, and now you learn this other new skill, and hey, that new skill actually has you practicing that other thing that you were supposed to review. So you don't have to review that for a while longer. We can wait a little bit. And so this kind of gets into you can actually frame the problem as like, okay, wait, so if people are getting implicit review on all these sub skills, like why are we just like leaving it to like randomly asking them to learn new stuff and tracking things backward? Why don't we actually choose the new stuff so that it intentionally covers all the review you need? And then, so it's kind of like we're just trying to have you run as fast as you can learning new stuff that knocks out all the implicit review. So the knowledge graph kind of organizes all the thinking on this and makes it so that you can do all these cool algorithmic treatments. You treat it like sort of like a physical or computational problem as opposed to just kind of like having this nebulous idea in your mind.
Right. So there's like an optimization problem there. A thought occurred to me, which is, okay, let's say you have the math knowledge graph, which has all these like foundational, like concrete skills that Lego into one another and then can get mutually reinforced. In order to move efficiently across that, you need certain habits already, right? Like it requires a certain amount of consistency, a certain amount of focus, etc. So the thought occurred to me was like, what is the meta knowledge graph that actually allows you to take advantage of these kinds of learnings, kind of in the spirit of the name of this podcast. And the first thing that comes to mind is something about consistency. Like I feel like all of this deliberate practice, the training in an efficient way requires showing up like every day. But I imagine there's like a few fundamental things. And I know you've written about consistency, but I'm curious to hear you riff on, what are some of the things in the meta knowledge graph?
You can train with the best trainer in the world, and they can have you doing the perfect exercises for you. And if you only show up one day a month for 30 minutes, like what's going to happen? It's like, right. There's two factors. There's the efficiency of your training and there's the volume of your training. And your progress is basically you multiply those factors. And either of those factors are low, then you don't make progress. And so, right, one part of it is solving let's try to make your training as efficient as possible. But the other part is like, you have to show up consistently. You're not going to make progress. There's no magic pill that's like, hey, you just have a 30-minute intervention once and now you know all of math, or you are now a bodybuilder or an Olympic gymnast, like from this one, like, no. Right. It's a long game. You got to be consistent, and consistent in the sense that you really have to make it a like many times a week habit. It's like you should really, if there's I guess it just comes down to you need to be serious about really intentionally improving your abilities at a thing. You're probably spending at least several hours on it per week, cut up over multiple days. I guess there's a lot of educators, there's several groups of students. You can kind of split a student population in many ways, but one particular split is the students who actually want to like show up and learn, and the students who don't. And so sometimes this will often cause teachers to kind of like try to change their teaching techniques to like, okay, let's give up some efficiency gain and just try to get these students through the door that otherwise wouldn't be coming through the door. And so part of the thing is like back to deliberate practice. Like it's hard, right? Like it's not particularly pleasant. You want to do it because it improves performance. If you have a class full of students that have two different perspectives, some students want to engage in deliberate practice and learn. Other students are just not even, like, it's hard enough to try to get them to do the exercise. You have to kind of like sell them on the idea of actually getting better at this thing first. You get these two groups of students, they're kind of at different stages in their talent development journey. And right, it becomes challenging to try to get the right setup for both of them. But so I guess, the question is like, how if you have somebody who has not built consistency yet, has not built habit yet, how do you go about building that? And I think it's, well, one of the things that comes up often is like, what actually causes people to want to continue improving at something? And sometimes people get confused about this, thinking like you can just sell somebody on the idea of being really good at, if you make it sound exciting enough to them, then that'll fuel them through their talent development journey. But what really happens is that gives an initial activation energy that starts getting them on the rails practicing, and then from there, the next big lever is like, just how much are they improving through practice? And it's really like improvements, seeing yourself improve. That's kind of what fuels you to keep on going. And when people
comes back to the efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But the key to like getting like consistent is get results. That'll make you want to come back and get consistent. But it's true that initially there is like quite a bit of, there's an activation energy. You just got to get yourself to start doing it before you see any results. And especially something like fitness or math, where it's like you're not going to see big results after the first session or even the second session. It's going to take probably a couple weeks, maybe a couple months before you really start to notice. Like you just think you're going to a gym to get fitter. Like, when do you actually notice a change in your physique? It probably doesn't happen for a little while. So you can't be discouraged because you didn't get like 6-packs abs after the first weekend at the gym.
Okay, so I kind of want to put a few elements on the table related to this like meta problem, because it's almost like there's like a bootstrapping issue for some people. Like, some people are self-motivated. I imagine most of the people signing up to Math Academy, they have a certain level of motivation. So Math Academy, it gets to focus specifically on the efficiency part of it, but maybe there's a bunch of people who would want to learn math and would want to sign up for Math Academy, but they don't have like the prerequisites to even do something consistent like that. So a couple of things that came to mind for me. I remember when I was in school, I remember the first time I actually had like the first person experience of doing something consistently every day for like at least a month. And I think it was like Code Academy, or one of these like online coding schools, where I was doing like 15 to 30 minutes a day. And it was just, I just had a streak going, and I wanted to like keep the streak going. And I remember some 30 days into it or something, I realized I hadn't actually done anything like that, like consciously before. And the experience of being consistent with something for 30 days was novel. I was like, wow, like I don't even know what it's like to have a fixed access in my day where come rain or shine, like this is a thing that I'm going to do. It doesn't matter if it's a Saturday or a Sunday or a weekday or whatever. It doesn't matter if I have bad sleep. Like there's something that I'm going to return to. So at least to me, it felt like consistency training for its own sake, like was valuable. Like you could have picked anything. It could have been like just sit for 5 minutes a day or something. And something about that was like a new skill for me. So that's one point. The other point is actually having some sort of intrinsic connection with the thing that you're doing. And I know in my experience, there's been a bit of a journey in discovering what my actual desires are as opposed to desires I've imported from others. You know, it's like, it's good to do this for economic reasons, like learn math because it'll get you a better job, or your parents want you to do something. And there's a lot of like unlearning involved to come back to who you actually are, or maybe some initial spark of like your genuine curiosities, and then building on top of that, because that's not enough. Like it's not enough to just have some curiosity. And then maybe the third thing I'll say is, at least for me in my psychology, skin in the game is really important. So if I want to really go deep on something, I'll schedule like a presentation I have to give on it, you know, a month from now or something, or do a podcast interview. And like, I'm just, now my motivation's aligned and I'm just going to fill all my time learning about this thing. Anyway, so I wanted to put some of those things out there. You can react to anything there or maybe add your own, but like maybe speaking to this like meta level for people who aren't intrinsically motivated, don't have the consistency skill yet. What are some things that might be helpful?
Yeah, I like what you said about putting skin in the game. About you, it's like you make a promise to somebody that you're going to do something, or you sign up. It's like you kind of create a forcing function for yourself. And yeah, I think that's one thing that sometimes gets overlooked, especially in education. There's often a focus on intrinsic motivation, and while it is always good to like try to build intrinsic motivation for whatever you're doing or for whatever you're learning, or to guide yourself into the areas where you have more natural intrinsic motivation, like you can always step it up a level by adding these extrinsic incentives. Yeah. And even if you are intrinsically motivated, like just layer on additional incentives. It's going to get you more motivated. Yeah, and it's I think that's especially helpful when like at the beginning of a learning journey, when you don't have a sense of your progress. You may not have even gotten far enough into this discipline to build up a whole lot of intrinsic motivation. Because I think, I mean, a lot of the intrinsic motivation is like comes from playing almost like playing a game that becomes fun. Mm-hmm. But the game, like, it's not fun until you learn how to play it. And yes. So like in something, these things can feel like almost like playing a game later on, but initially, in order to get the sub skills in place to even get to that point, it takes some time. The same way of like playing a sport, like playing hockey. Hockey is fun once you know how to skate, mm-hmm. And you don't feel that the same that the same elements that make hockey fun are not necessarily going to be in the process of learning how to skate. So sometimes you just got to break through a barrier, and you can sometimes get yourself to do that. I think that is common to a lot of beginners. It's like, okay, at the beginning, like it's not going to be as fun as it'll get later, and you just kind of gotta break through this barrier and set up some incentives, set up some kind of social structure. Maybe at the beginning, it doesn't even have to be like perfectly optimal learning. Mm-hmm. It just like, you just optimize getting yourself in the door, doing this thing, seeing yourself improve at it. And then once you're at a level of comfort and like, okay, this is part of what I do. I see myself as being good at this thing. I enjoy this thing. It's part of my identity now. Then that's when you can start like, okay, you don't have to protect your feelings of pleasure during the activity as much anymore. And you can start to turn the dial on deliberate practice.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things come to mind here. I know a lot of people who got really burnt out by coercing themselves to do a bunch of things that ultimately weren't connected to their soul. So, they went into career paths because of the economic reasons, or they, like I grew up doing classical piano, and a lot of the students that my teachers taught were like extremely disciplined, like practicing multiple hours a day, and they were kids, and so the pressure was coming from their parents, and it was this very brutal relationship they had with their learning trajectory, and they got really good, but in some of these cases, once they became adults, they stopped playing. So there's these failure modes, and so one reaction to that is to minimize self-coercion as much as possible, and I've definitely seen this pendulum swing too far, where you throw the baby out with the bathwater, where you realize that where minimizing self-coercion becomes something like protecting pleasure at the expense of the necessary effort for actual training and deliberate practice. So I just want to name that because I do think effort is good, and it doesn't have to be self-coercive. It can actually just be like challenging yourself is a good thing. And so that's just, one thing I want to name. And then one solution that I've seen, like I always joke, if I were to summarize all the personal development advice that I've learned that actually works in like one tweet, or it would be just well-crafted 30-day challenges, because 30 days is like enough of a period of time where you can actually break through. You can bootstrap into that loop where things can start to become interesting and pleasurable, and you see results. But it's not so long that you feel like you're committing your life to something that you're not 100% certain on. And then you can also potentially build a habit. Some habits form pretty quickly, some take longer. And then the well-crafted side of it is having actually the discussion with yourself of what would I do, without coercing yourself too much. So that involves like the skin in the game, that involves the accountability, that involves, to what extent am I going to do this just with like raw effort, like white knuckle it versus, like stop, like what's like one example is the way I developed a gym habit. It sounds very stupid, but like years ago, I worked at a place that was really close to a gym. Like on the way home, I'd walk by a gym. So I made a commitment. I think it initially was 30 days where I would go to the gym every day. Like that was a commitment. And so literally if I walked in the gym, and the gym had a door at the front and a door at the back. So many days I literally would just walk in and then walk out. Like I'd check in and walk out, and that would count. And so I trained like the automaticity of like the gym is now like a part of my life. And then eventually like, I'm there, so I'm going to work out. And then it just became kind of a part of who I am. But yeah, so anyways, I wanted to speak to self-coercion. A tactic for that is well-crafted 30-day challenges. And yeah, if you have anything to react to there, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I don't think that sounds stupid at all. That's a great idea. I mean, it's like anything that you want to try to get yourself to do. It's just, you just need to lower the friction enough that you start. It's about lowering this distance between you and the thing that you're trying to get yourself to do. And whatever it takes, like it can always start small. Like, yeah, it can always start very small. To kick a habit off of going to the gym, like and exercising, like you don't necessarily, you don't have to be doing what you're doing on day 30 on day one. Day one can be just the smallest bit of intentional action towards this goal, and you just get more comfortable. It's right. It's like initially it's a new thing, and then becomes familiar, and then you layer on some more element of newness to it. It's almost like a deliberate practice, sort of like building your habit. You're working at the edge of familiarity, and like what is part of your routine. Like, okay, this is part of my routine. Let's add more to it. Let's add more to it. Add more to it until you're kind of doing what it is you want to get yourself to do. But
so, I feel like everyone kind of knows this. Like people have read Atomic Habits, and like everyone knows like you train consistency first, or you start with automaticity and then you start building on it, but almost nobody does that. And I wonder, what do you think the bottleneck is?
Yeah, well, I think I mean, that's a really good question, actually. So I've not had enough heart-to-heart conversations with people on this to really have a confident answer, but I can speculate, and I'd be interested to know what you think too. But if I were to just speculate, I think one element is well, okay, I'll just name some things that I've seen happen to math students, and I don't know the relative frequencies of these things, but just some of the failure modes are. Failure mode number one is somebody who sets the bar too high from day one, and so they say, I want to learn math, and then they crack open. Well, okay, yeah, actually, so somebody gets excited about math because they saw like all this machine learning stuff happening nowadays, and they're like, wow, machine learning, that's really cool. I want to learn how to do this. Oh, wow, everyone says it's like a bunch of math under the hood. Well, I guess I want to learn math now. Let's see what I need to do. Oh, you need multivariable calculus and linear algebra and probability and statistics. And so they go attack these high level, these are university courses, and meanwhile their algebra is shaky. They forgot how to add fractions. Like their high school and elementary school math is kind of like rotting away because they haven't been using that for so long. And they get so kind of tied up in like, no, I have to, like, I can't go back. I don't have time to go back and rebuild the foundations. I need to. They just get, their ego gets too caught up in this goal, and they don't want to drop down to a level where it's possible. It's like they feel like the effort that they put forth towards their goal doesn't count unless it's like right within striking distance of the thing. So in your case, when you were going to the gym each day, it's like, imagine if you had said like, well, it doesn't count unless I actually exercise, and my exercise doesn't count unless I am putting a ton of weight on the bar and also being there for like 90 minutes, and like you put all these like conditions on it, and like it doesn't count unless I do a certified like Arnold Schwarzenegger workout. Like, and then like, okay, I mean, if you're gonna hold yourself to that level of standard right from the beginning, then you're cooked. Yeah, exactly. You're not gonna do it. So that happens all the time. And even when people know, right, like you said, like they know they should kind of like tone it down, but they just get into the mindset of like, well, like lifting light weights is for weak people, and I want to be a strong people. I'm not gonna lift light weights. I'm gonna power through it. And they kind of overestimate how their willingness to stick with something. They don't see a lot of improvement because they're practicing at trying to pull off skills that are too high level. Just a lack of willingness to start where they are. And I think. Okay, I guess now I'm thinking about all these other failure modes that I've seen. I think it's really, it comes down to a lack of willingness to start where one is, or sometimes even identify where one is. Sometimes people think they're at a certain level and they're not. Like, I can't tell you how many people sign up for our like a calculus course or like a math for machine learning course, and they think like, oh, I got A's in high school math. They don't realize how much they had forgotten and how incomprehensive their high school math courses were. Yeah. So they think they're just taking off right at this level, but then they actually start working on the system and realize that like, oh, it's a very rude awakening to realize that you're actually missing a lot more prerequisites than you thought.
So the thing I was going to say is people are bottlenecked on humility. Like it takes a certain amount of humility to do the thing I did where I'm like, I'm just going to go to the gym and not train even, but just like check off the box that I'm like attending the gym. And I felt kind of stupid at times. I felt like I hadn't, it's like, I just had to accept like, I don't have the consistency yet. And so that takes some humility. I think what's so challenging about this is often what inspires people to get into something in the first place is the flashy results. So like, I don't know, with fitness, you see some fitness influencer and you're like, oh, I want to like get jacked or something. And then you have that in your mind, which you're, 7 years away from. And that's not going to help you with like figuring out exactly where you're at, starting where you are. So yeah, humility, maybe self-deception as well. And I think certain fields lend themselves more to self-deception. Like I think one thing I notice a lot is you can fake knowledge socially pretty easily by stringing a bunch of words together like an LLM. And then people will grant like, oh, this guy knew the right buzzwords adjacent to the thing we're talking about. And they kind of like give you the check mark that that thing, and then you create an identity around it. And then it's very rare where you get actual like hardcore tested on a lot of things. So yeah, there's probably a ton of self-deception. And then as you said, it's a rude awakening to realize like, oh, I thought I was here, but I'm actually here. Yeah,
especially if you spent a lot of time with this kind of the self-deception, and now everyone thinks you're the in your friend group, you're the nerd who's like really good at math. Well, if you're really good at math, why are you like working on cleaning up your algebra foundations? And it becomes right. You give this false perception that becomes part of your identity, and now dropping down to a level that's appropriate for you shatters this perception, this facade. And so you don't want to, you kind of put yourself in a position where you just can't budge.
This comes to a question I had about you, like a personal question, which is, in a way, like what is Justin's ideology, or like what is your? I think there's a certain life philosophy that is much more suited to knowing where you're at, having the humility to do deliberate practice, like being consistent. And then there's some life philosophies that aren't as suited to that. An essay by Paul Graham comes to mind as well, like a famous one where he said, like keep your identity small. So if you identify as like the math guy in your friend group, then it's going to be a lot more costly to like brush up on your fundamentals to that identity. But if your identity is small, or if you've rooted your identity in something a lot more antifragile, then you'll be open to doing like the beginner humble thing way more often. So yeah, I'm curious, what is your kind of broader disposition towards life? Like how do you make sense of the efforts that you're putting into learning and helping other people learn?
Yeah, the thing about having an identity built around being like the math guy or the X guy or like insert thing here guy is, I think it kind of forces you to, it impedes your focus on the things that really matter to you. I think most of the time, the things that really touch one's soul are not necessarily. It's like it's more of a mission, like an action. Like I want to do something, as opposed to just I want to be well known for this or that. And I think in my case, in particular, like I definitely I remember during like high school and college, I had some element that was like being the math guy or just being like, knowledgeable about math, physics, and like bunch of research stuff. It's like there's these things that were a part of me that had a similar effect, and it's like, well, I kind of want to be like really good at them, but why? I think this probably happens to a lot of people as they kind of just figure out more of who they are and what their goals are in life. This kind of morphed into a different goal, more of a mission of just like optimizing math education, like just identifying some problem, some area of the world that kind of makes me upset. And in that there's so many inefficiencies in math education currently, and there's so many students who could be learning a lot more math and doing a lot more cool things in life, and there's just so so much friction that kind of gets them off the rails. So now it's like, I feel like my identity is more centered around this mission that I'm doing, and as a result, it's kind of broadened the range of things that I do, and this has led to some surprising results, like that. I just, for instance, I never thought of myself as a writer, I guess until recent. I still don't. I'm not sure I even think of myself as a writer, but I guess I've written quite a bit just in service of this mission, and then it's
you
just,
write really well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad that, I guess I've just been surprised. I guess I never thought of myself as being like particularly good at writing. It's just something like, okay, I can check the boxes on the basic communication and stuff. But I just, in service of this larger goal, I've just been, I guess, putting my reps in and thinking really hard about certain things, and this has happened as a result. Likewise, when I started my career in tech, I was working as a data scientist. I don't really think of myself as a software engineer who like works on like real-time systems. Like I was like, okay, I only do the stuff that's like mathy and that you can fit in a script or like a Python notebook. It's like deploying stuff on a server or having some real time like validations, like whatever. Like just didn't. That was never something that I thought that I do. But then I just got involved working on a mission, and the needs came up, and I was like, well, I guess I'll do this, I'll do that. Like, gotta figure out how to solve this problem, solve that problem, and then like I don't know. I look up years later, and I guess I have accumulated a lot of software engineering skills, and yeah, I guess I would agree with keeping your identity small. It's like. It's like, because if you center your identity around something, you just pick something off the shelf. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm gonna become amazing at. You simultaneously like overestimate like how willing you are to get good at this thing, and how talented you are at this thing, while underestimating all these other things that you could be good at if you just gave it a shot. And when you have more of a mission, then it's just easier to just let go of like, I'm a whatever I need to do to get done today to make this thing happen.
Yeah, what's so great about that is if I just like tune into my own sense of what is it that makes me want to have an identity or to be known for a specific thing. It has something to do with feeling like socially valued and being like legible socially, and just it creates a certain amount of order and allows me to say no to a bunch of other stuff. Like there's certain things that having an identity gives you, and so I can understand why people might be attracted to that. But then when I think of having a mission, it gives you all of those things as well, while also not bringing in the downside of making you too rigid, too ossified, or too committed to a way that people used to see you or something like that. And so, mission over identity, I think, is like a very simple takeaway there. I know you've written about if someone doesn't have a mission and they're searching for one. I know you had a couple posts about like practically how to think about that. So what would you say to someone who's like, okay, great, I want a mission, but I feel like I'm interested in like 50 million different things, and you guys have just been saying you need consistency, deliberate practice that requires sacrifice and focus. I'm overwhelmed. How do I start? How do I figure out what my mission is?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? We talk like, it's always, you want a mission, but how do you get a mission? I guess this is kind of a common thing that I think comes up in chats with people. I want these things. How do I get them? Like that. That's often the less obvious part. And I think So I think when it comes to finding a mission, it's sort of like you're not gonna point at the first thing that comes to you in life and be like, that's my mission, and be confident in it. It's like there's a wide sampling that needs to occur first for you to know like what's out there. And I don't think that stage can be bypassed. Benjamin Bloom, the Two Sigma guy, so he actually did a bunch of a study on talent development. And he found basically he interviewed a large number of highly accomplished people in a wide array of talent fields, and found that the journey to developing their talent tended to proceed along the same few stages. Stage one was kind of like the sampling gears, where you just like try a bunch of stuff and you don't get a lot of critical feedback on it. You're just like you get you get rewarded in the sense of like praise and stuff if you're just trying stuff and playing around and just doing a lot of things. And then
discovery.
Yeah, discovery. And it's like the point is not for you to upskill in the most efficient way. The point is to find out what quest do you want to go on. And so you try a large number of things. Then stage two was like, okay, you pick this one particular thing, or maybe two things, but you're going down the funnel and excluding things that you're filtering, things that you're willing to invest your time into, and then you start taking your time more seriously and engage in deliberate practice and really upskill. And even at this point, you don't necessarily know what your mission is. You might have a goal in mind of like, oh, I want to win this or win that, but it's not necessarily part of like it might still be sort of like a single-minded identity, or like a narrowly scoped identity, and it's really like you might not even realize like what your full mission is until you get to a point where you've climbed up the skill tree in this domain high enough to sort of see a bigger picture and see how you might contribute to that bigger picture. And and then stage three is kind of like, once you're all upskilled, you've chosen your area of specialization, and you have gained serious skills in that area. Now it's like, okay, go do something big, be a world-class performer in this area. And you need to, in order to do that, you kind of need to find your individual style, and just what makes you, and what are you really trying to accomplish here. And it's kind of like a return to stage one, almost with a playfulness, but it's like you're playing, you're back to play, but now with your serious skills that you've built up. But anyway, to put this in concrete terms, in terms of somebody who is like, okay, I got all these interests. How do I know what my mission's going to be? How do I find a mission? Well, I mean, I don't think that there's a way to bypass these stages. It's like you can't I can't tell you which one of your interests is going to be your mission. You just have to spend a lot of time doing these interests until you get a sense of what you like and dislike. And it is. I think you kind of have to approach it too, in the sense that it's like, okay, on one hand, like you're playing around with your various interests, but this is also work. The point is to do things and do them do them far enough to understand if you really like it or not. Like so that you're not just judging something based on its first impression. Just get a real sense: does something speak to you or not? And that can involve it's kind of like I just think of like dating. Like some people just like they don't want to go on dates because they're like, well, what's the point? I know the person that I go on a date with, I'm not gonna like marry them because the odds of that are like so small. And then they just get into this like, well, they never like go on dates, and then they never find, or well, eventually, hopefully, they find somebody, but it's just they're not.
Not taken seriously.
Yeah, not taking it seriously, right? So it's like, yeah. So you're right. It comes down. I think it just comes down to like you got to put in a large volume of work. Like it's gonna be work at every single stage. There's no escaping it. Like the work. If you don't put in the volume of work, then you're not gonna find the thing. And if you don't put in the volume of work, then you're not gonna upskill in the area. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to like play like a master in the field and find your individual contribution to its work all the way. That's my take on it.
Yeah. It's funny. This reminds me of something, a one-liner you had that I loved, where you said the magic you're looking for is in the full-assed effort you're avoiding. And I think it's so true. There is like a ticket cost, there's like an entry fee to the level of mastery, or, I think I'm learning jazz piano now, and I am really inspired by people like Bill Evans who can like improvise freely and seem to express complex inner states on the piano with ease. Like it's such a beautiful thing. But in order to do that, I have to learn the language. And there's no way around it. It's going to be memorizing scales. It's going to be doing deliberate practice at the piano for years before I can play anything like that. And so, yeah, there's magic on the other side of it, but it requires full-assed effort. I wonder if maybe just to make this really concrete, let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, late 20s, early 30s. They work like a high-paying tech job or something that they don't hate. It's intellectually stimulating. They get paid really well, but it's not their purpose. They know it's not their purpose. Somewhere in the back of their mind, they kind of feel like they need to figure out what their purpose is, but they don't really know how to start. And they already have like a 40-hour-a-week workload. What would you suggest to them so that they can move through those stages in a way that's actually practical?
Yeah, I think, I hear that a lot too of like, right, kind of people that are kind of later into, or not late into their careers, but it's like they've got some kind of homeostasis in life. There's some stability and they're worried about like giving that up. And I think, so I've got kind of two takes on this. So take number one, I think it is definitely possible to change up your life still in a somewhat stable way. You don't have to like quit your job tomorrow and then like ask yourself, what do I want to do? Like you can kind of plan this out more, so it's a little less rough riding. But like the earlier you can figure this out in life, just the easier it is to change course, because the longer you commit to something, the harder it is to. It's like you've built your life like a piece of furniture or like a house, and like everything is now installed, and now you're wanting to make adjustments to it. Like, yeah, it's gonna require like a lot of change, and it would have been easier to just build it the way you wanted it in the first place. Again, not saying that like there's no way to salvage the situation, but like if somebody is earlier in life listening to this, then my advice would be like, okay, like figure this out now. Like don't just wait, don't just go through the motions and think like, oh, I'll figure out what I want to do when I'm 30. In my 20s I'll just like get a stable job. And like no, like you need to start thinking about this now. But okay, so let's say so somebody has gone through, has a stable job, maybe has fairly high salary. They got the golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
So what do you do in the situation? So I think the way it starts out is having a hobby that you take progressively more and more seriously. And so yeah, on one hand, I think it's kind of interesting to explore the idea of like, okay, what if you just jump ship right away, just quit tomorrow, ask yourself the next day, like, what do I want to do? Let's see what goes wrong with that scenario and see how just how we can avoid those issues. The things that go wrong, I think, are well, okay, number one is like, okay, you gave up your salary. Now you have a forcing function that's like, I need to find another paying job really fast. And that's probably going to force you to make a suboptimal decision and just to commit to something that maybe doesn't touch your soul, but just pays the bills. In that case, like, why not just stay with your current situation? So, so you don't want to make any like rash decisions. You only want to like, you don't want to like tear the house down, then build up another house that you don't even like. You want to make sure it's being built up the right way
or start
the
with
second
a room.
time. Yeah, start with the room, right? So I think like start with like a hobby kind of, but like take the hobby more and more seriously. If there is a I guess it's kind of like go on the side outside of work. I know this is going to be more work and more taxing, but that there's no avoiding it. Go through your sampling years, do your first dates with all these different things that you could that you would consider that you might be interested in, and just put in the work. This is going to involve a lot of time. This is not just a like, let me like play around for like
what,
10 minutes a day,
10 hours a week. Like what do you?
I don't know. I don't know for sure, but like if it were me, if I were very serious about this, I would carve out like at least a couple hours a day.
Yeah.
And like 10 hours a week I think sounds about right. I mean, my gut says like 1 hour a week is not serious. 100 hours a week is obviously like not even possible if you have another job. So like 10 hours seems about the right order of magnitude here. And all right, so you have to go through your sampling, find a thing that you're willing to commit to, and then start upskilling in that area. And if this is really a thing that you want to take seriously and that you're gonna recenter your life around, then you should be able to find it within yourself to commit to building this up on the side. If you can't really commit to building this up on the side of what you're already doing, then I don't know that you have that it speaks to you enough for you to really make a leap. You might end up in the same situation.
Right.
So yeah, you want to build it up, and I think eventually you hit a point like, okay, say you build this up, you become skilled in some area, and you can get I guess like make money in a professional capacity in this new area, and I think that's when you take the leap, when you can start like sustaining yourself in a professional capacity. But this might involve a pay cut, because you're not gonna be like amazing at it first. But I think once you can reasonably sustain yourself, then you take the leap. You take the pay cut. You just suck it up, and then you start improving again. But to be honest, I've not seen enough of these things play out to be 100% confident in all this advice. This is just kind of what would I do, and what did I do with my own career. So, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on? Have you seen this play out? What works? What doesn't?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I also want to highlight some of the things I'm hearing implicit in what you're saying. I think a big thing is actually there is a leap of faith to all of this. So even when you were talking about Bloom's stages, to go from like the discovery sampling stage to then doubling down on something and then to eventually reaching mastery, like that process, what keeps you there and pulls you there, especially in the beginning, is something like you need some faith. And I just call that out because I know in my life, I've definitely taken too long with certain things because I was waiting for a higher threshold of certainty. I was like, I wanted to be a little bit more certain. And something that really helped me was realizing that certainty is a myth, and like, round up from 51% and just take the leap of faith. So I think that's like one important element to highlight. The other thing that I think is kind of hope inducing, and this is something I've noticed in my experience, is that, yeah, it's going to be hard. Well, actually, before I say this thing, I want to also dial up something else you said, which is to feel the sense of urgency. Like, this is your responsibility. If you're in that homeostasis, which is often mediocrity, right? It's like not so bad that you have a fire under your ass to quit, but it's not that great that you feel like your soul is alive. Feeling a sense of urgency about that is, I think, a good activator into what's ultimately going to be a very hard but rewarding path. And the quote that proverb came to mind, where it's like, the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is today. And yeah, take the L that like, okay, you didn't do this when you were in your 20s or whatever, but like, be happy. Take the W that you're aware of this now and you're not like 50, or even if you are 50, just like recognize that if you're hearing this now, then you're actually like in a good position. You have good opportunity as long as you take those leaps of faith. And then here's a hopeful thing. I think so in my experience, when I followed my instincts of what I wanted to do with my life and what I thought I was uniquely gifted at, and eventually the flywheel started to turn a little bit, and I start to get validation that like, yes, okay, I'm seeing results. I think there is a potential for me to make this my livelihood, etc. Something else got unlocked, which was my agency went up. Like my capacity to just make things work went up like crazy because I was aligned. So that meant, okay, I don't have a salary coming in. I'm trying to keep myself afloat on my own accord. And instead of feeling stressed about it or looking for someone to solve that problem for me, my mind would just like come up with solutions. Like I'd be like, okay, how are we going to solve this? And it's almost like I accessed more of my intelligence. And I think some of that has to do with the skin in the game thing, but I also think it has to do with feeling aligned. Like it's your own, like you have ownership. I think it's the ownership piece. So I name that as almost a potential waypoint, or like something to look forward to when you're investing the faith along this path. Like maybe at some point you'll cross to this threshold of much higher agency, which is definitely true for my own experience. And I've seen this in a bunch of other people that I've worked with. And it's, yeah, I think it's worth it, especially if you have a high need for autonomy. And maybe not everyone does, but yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I totally agree. It's like you get the alignment right, and then suddenly all these, it's like you can think deeper about everything you're doing, come up with more solution. I guess it's aligning all the incentives, external and internal motivations, and
A friend of mine just came back from the last batch of YC, Y Combinator, and we were doing a little debrief on like what the experience was like, what was good about it, what was bad about it. And he said that probably the most powerful effect of YC, like even beyond the network and the resources and stuff, was that for a 3-month period, he had pre-decided that this is like all I'm doing is building this company and staying healthy. Like it's just, I'm working out and I'm working on this company. And something about that was so liberating, because you're no longer deciding like what to do with your time when you hit a problem, you're not like, okay, I'll go do something else. I've worked enough today. It's like you stick with the problem. And he said the level of focus that he was able to achieve because of that container was like life-changing. He realized that there's like a momentum that builds up. He realized that there's like a mode that you get into where all your resources come online to like solve the thing in front of you, and it just becomes extremely engaging. And I think if you've never experienced anything like that, this whole thing just feels like it's going to be really hard and a lot of work and like not fun. But I think basically you unlock more like resources along the way.
Yeah, totally. I think a large part of that too is like having just all the context spun up in your mind of what you're doing. Also, as like whenever you only do something for maybe a couple hours a day, or you're just not thinking about it all the time. You kind of turn your brain off for a long time, and you come back to it later. You can encounter a problem and you're like, later, deal with it later. Then it's like when you come back to it, you have to spin up all of your mental resources, and especially if you're just context switching over and over and over to like. If you have this mission or this problem that you're working on just at the forefront of your mind, kind of like all the time, or like even when you're just taking a shower, it's just in the back of your mind, and it's like just sort of, it never goes away. It only like moves out of the way slightly to let other things occupy your mind. Then, it's like I guess for me, it feels almost like being able to in some, almost like you're able to hold more in working memory. That's not exactly true, but it's like you're every neural connection in your brain, it feels like it's just more, it's ready to fire. It's like, I dare you to poke me just the littlest amount, and I will fire and alert my buddies, and we'll come up with some pattern that manifests as a solution. Like everything is just so trigger happy in a good way. And you get like the smallest thing, like you're thinking about a problem, and then like, I don't know, sometime later in the day, you just think about some other random thing, and then that causes a cascade into like, wait, no, I know what I should do, because you had everything all primed up and kind of ready to go. But if you don't have everything all primed up, you're not thinking about this very much. It's like you gotta just get the ball rolling again. Let's like reboot the computer to turn on again. Yeah.
So this reminds me of something you said, where you want to keep your hand on the boulder.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Keep your hands on the boulders. Just the idea of like so when you're on a mission, you're trying to solve some problem. It's like you're just pushing a boulder in some direction. It's a really heavy boulder, but it's moving. And so this is like almost embarrassingly obvious, but like if you want the boulder to keep on moving, your goal is to push this boulder over to that area. Like that's pretty much any action, any mission can be summed up in some kind of action that involves doing a thing. And so let's just say this thing is pushing a boulder. Like the minute you stop, like this boulder is easy to keep moving while you're pushing it. It's you got the momentum on your side. The minute that you stop pushing it and just hoping like that it's just gonna roll itself all the way over to the area, or like you think like you take your hands off of it, it's just not gonna move. And this is stupid obvious, but the people often like just get distracted by other things other than pushing the boulder. Which, okay, I guess a more clever insight to this, I think, is that when you are pushing this boulder a lot, and you're kind of increasing your surface area of things that you can be doing, like you solve a problem that opens up more possibilities in what you can do, and it's easy to just get kind of like pulled off by these fascinating distractions. You get pulled off course, and you're doing this one thing, and then, oh, that thing's cool, let me do that, and before you look up and you're like, wait, what am I even doing? What have I been doing for the past couple days? and then you realize like that you're pushing some rocks in some direction, but it's not the boulder that you are trying to push. You always have to kind of realign yourself and like, am I actually pushing the boulder? Okay, the obvious part is like, push the boulder, don't take your hands off the boulder. And the part where people often mess up is that they think they're pushing the boulder, but they don't realize that they've transitioned to pushing on something else.
It's
instead.
like you look down and it's like a totally different object. And the boulder's like over there.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Sometimes I think sometimes like I should say like, this doesn't mean that there is that one boulder that you always have to be pushing. Sometimes you might realize like that this new object that you're pushing is actually the thing that you want to be pushing. Yeah. This is now your boulder. But like that has to be, you don't want to get like nerd sniped by this, like, oh, that's cool. Like, and it's suddenly you're like solving some problem that doesn't actually contribute towards your solution. You want to intentionally like make sure you always identify what thing is the thing that you're supposed to be pushing, and then make sure that you're pushing it.
So the thing that's interesting for me here is this idea of how do you come back when you realize you've been distracted. So I have a habit tracker to make sure that I, doing all the things that I want to be doing that require long-term consistency. And then, you travel, or you have like one bad night of sleep or something, and then you have a bad day where you just like break all your streaks. And what I've noticed is that's okay. It's acceptable that this happens because life is complex. The key trait is you're going to fall off your horse, but the key trait you want to develop is time to back on horse. Like how short can that be? And often it's demoralizing to like, let's say you have like a 300-day meditation streak and then you ruin it in one day. That starting day one again feels somewhat demoralizing. So but that is the thing that should be maximally rewarded, because that's like the hard move. And in the limit, if you come back on your horse as fast as possible, it's like you never fell off, right? And so I wonder if you have any thoughts on, because with Math Academy, the deal is something like, give us 30 minutes or whatever amount of time you can afford every single day, focus time, and we'll do like the magical optimization stuff to find out your learning frontier and then give you problems exactly where you need them to be. And then you'll just get better and better at math. So consistency is extremely important, and coming back to it is extremely important when you fall off. So are there any like techniques to get back on your horse when you've broken a streak, or when you realize, come back to the boulder when you realize you've been letting go of it?
I think so. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's kind of like the double-edged nature of streaks, right? They get you like building something up, but then once you lose this streak, you might feel so bad that you just say screw it and rage quit the whole thing. Yeah. So you want to avoid that situation. I think so. There's a couple ways that you can do this. So the two things that come to mind are, thing number one is building in some kind of like allowed off day frequency, where it's like you might, depending on the person, this might be like, okay, I always take Sundays off. And then maybe that alleviates some stress, and you can say like, oh, if I screw up during the week, then I'll make it up on Sunday. It gives you like an
buffer day
or something like that. Or maybe this is once every 2 weeks, or like, I don't know. It depends person to person, but you give yourself a little bit of slack in the system. And this doesn't mean that you have to take the day off.
Yes.
You can go through your week and it's Sunday, and it's the option to take the day off. It's like you can if you want to and not feel guilty, or you can just keep on doing it and keep on adding to your streak, like whatever you feel like today. Of course, like this can't turn into like, oh, I have 1 day off a week, 2 days off a week, 3 days. Like you can't
bank them.
Let it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. You can't bank them. You can't have too frequent days off. But if you give yourself a little slack in the system, that can kind of help you get back on the horse without feeling bad. Because it's just the feeling bad is what keeps you from getting back on the horse. It's not that you've broken the habit. The habit takes like more days off in order to really break. It's really just about you're feeling bad. And I think but for me personally, what's worked the best for me is I don't think of it in terms of like off days or whatever. It's just like every day I want to be on, and then if there's a day that I don't get as much done that I wanted to get on to get done, or just something knocks me off the horse, then it's I guess I've just realized that it's not worth feeling bad. Like what is I know that
I would simply choose not to feel bad.
I think the if it's possible for somebody to get themselves to just not feel bad, like there's a couple ways that you can try to convince yourself not to feel bad. Way number one is like, just think about like, okay, what is the outcome of feeling bad? If I feel bad about this, then that's going to be kind of cognitively taxing for me today. I'm not going to have a good day. I might not get as much done now. That might spiral into like more issues in the future, kick me off the horse more. The way that really works for me is just like it's a sort of like acceptance of just things are not gonna go your way all the time, and you just have to
roll with the punches.
And I think that this sort of like acceptance is something that is particularly useful to build up, because it kind of helps you out in so many other areas too, in terms of like we talked about like sampling a bunch of different things that you could be doing, with the idea that, okay, probably the next thing that I try doing is not going to be the thing that I'm doing the rest of my life, but you got to try it. And so there's some sort of if you can just accept, like if you can go do a thing, invest effort into something, and not have that effort be fully realized, and just accept that, like, you know, oh well, I made a bet. It was a bet worth making. It's not like I have like some limited amount of like effort capacity to spend. I can just wake up tomorrow. I have new effort to spend on new things. I'm not trying to conserve effort here. And just if you spend your effort like kind of freely like that, and just not really expect too much in immediate return when you're in these sampling years, you can just it's just you can't feel bad about it. It's like you consider it a win.
Yes,
maybe that you did it and it didn't pan out as you. It's like, okay, I think. Here's the way I think actually this is kind of converted to it. I think it's more about just like, it's less about the result and more about knowing that you made the right decision, and with your time. So like, if you could play the situation over again, would you do the same things over again? If so, then why feel bad about it? Like, you can make all the right decisions in a day, and the outcome not be what you want based on your information that you had. Like, what are you going to do? And then if you did make a wrong decision, then you just like, okay, I'll learn from that, and I need to apply this in the future. So let me get back on my horse so that I can apply this in the future and have the satisfaction of running into the same situation and not having it derail me.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way that I tend to think of it.
That's great. Just reminds me of a quote from the Bhagavad Gita of you have the right to the action, but not the outcome. And it's kind of like a spiritual truth, but it's also just a good way to think about things. Like, as long as I've taken the action, that's my responsibility. And obviously you're going to tune your actions so that they maximize the results that you want, but you kind of have to have this openness to the results coming on their own terms in a way. Something that helps me with that is, you know, let's say you're going to the gym because you're not happy with your body and you have this image in mind of what it would look like if you were perfectly fit. If you just wait until you achieve that image to feel happy about your gym efforts, it's it's like a really hard, bad deal. And so something I brainwashed myself into thinking is that every time I take the action, I will see myself as someone who has the result, because over a long enough timeline, that will be the case. So it's kind of like, if you work out that day, you're jacked. Like, even if it's your first day in the gym, you should feel jacked the day, like every day you worked out. Like, that's kind of like the simple way to put it. So that's something that really helps me. And then with getting back on your horse, in terms of like interesting user experience solutions for this, the best that I've ever seen is like with streaks and stuff is this app called Readwise, which I'm sure you're familiar with because it's like spaced repetition and stuff. They have like some sort of window where you can recover your streak. Mm-hmm. I think it's like a week or 5 days or something like that, where you have a chance to go back and review the flashcards that you forgot to review. And that's worked so well. That's been like the longest streak I've ever had with something, because I can always go back and fill it. And then another thing, this is something I'm working on, just like vibe coding a habit tracker. What I want is some sort of UX element that rewards you if you come back from an off day. Just something to celebrate that what you just did there, that's actually the move that we're training. Like, you deserve double the rewards today because yesterday you didn't do it. Like something like that.
Yeah, those are all. Yeah, those are cool insights. Yeah, I'd agree with you on all fronts of that. And one thing I think related to this that we haven't addressed is another part of like getting back on the horse is it's the social environment. Yeah. If you have like a community of people, like you can kind of think like if you're working out with a personal trainer and you just kind of fall off your horse and you don't show up, what are they going to do? Probably a good personal trainer is going to like send you a text, be like, hey, like, am I going to see you tomorrow? Or just like kind of try to get you to commit to coming again. Try to pull you back on the horse. And a lot of even on X, a lot of people post their progress and we'll get people asking like what course you're in now, how's your progress going. It's like if you can get involved in a community of learners or of people who are working out or whatever, like that sense of belonging and also other people reaching out to kind of pull you back on the rails, I think can assist you as well. And this is something that I think beginners in particular often shy away from, even though beginners are often like the people most in need of this, because they're embarrassed because they're not jacked yet. They're not doing university level math yet. Maybe they're overweight and they don't want to make friends at the gym because they're overweight and they think everyone's going to be like laughing at them or something. Or they don't want to post their math progress because they are working on like adding fractions or solving linear equations. Right. And it's something that everyone else is like, wow, like they think everyone else is like going to be like, wow, you're such a moron. I can't believe you need to go fill in your grade school or high school math foundations. But this is not what you can, if there's a good community of people like working on upskilling something, like they're not going to be making fun of you for this. And especially the people who are oftentimes the only people who will make fun of you are the people who are at your level or lower and are just insecure about their own situation. Right. The people who are actually skilled, who are like the people who are actually jacked in the gym, and the people who are like seriously knowledgeable in mathematics and seriously skilled, like they're just gonna be happy for you. They're gonna be like, just, you can, and especially because they see like, when you see somebody getting their beginner gains and they're just like they're progressing so quickly, it's like it's so motivating. And I guess all this to say, if you're a beginner, then don't feel like you have to be advanced in order to join like some kind of community of learners or try to like post your progress or whatever. Like you can do this right away, and you can have meaningful support from even more advanced people. Like they're gonna get excited just seeing your progress. It's not about where you are; it's about where you're going and how much velocity you have. Yeah.
That's such a good reminder, because also the people who are further along, they know what it takes, so they're going to appreciate your position. And as you said, it's only the people who are insecure that would make fun of you. But I don't know, most people will be supportive. It kind of comes back to the thing about humility and identity. That's another thing that's gated by humility. Like, are you willing to actually be honest about where you're at in front of others? And I think accountability is an avenue for bootstrapping your own personal integrity. I think people find it easier to stay in integrity with another person than it is with themselves. Like if you have a meeting with someone in your calendar, you'll show up to it more likely than if you have a time block that you gave yourself to like work on the thing you care about. And I think ultimately you want to be someone who just has integrity with yourself, like the things that you value, you take action on. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. But developing that skill or that way of being is hard. And I think a good place to start is in community and having integrity with others. Before we close, one thing I'd love to do, which we haven't done yet, is just rapid fire go through a bunch of key concepts in learning that you think are just like valuable that people should know. And I have a list here that I took from the Math Academy website that I can just name and then have you explain. But there might be a better way around this. So I wonder if you have if you have a short list in mind, or if there's like a set of myths that you just like to bust when it comes to learning. Like, what's the best way to get this stuff out of your head?
Yeah, sure. So I actually do have a list that I can go through. I remember I once there was a Stack Exchange question that was about like which cognitive psychology findings are solid that can be used to help students learn better. And I initially meant to, well, okay, I wrote a short response to this, and then somebody else wrote an answer to it that was like basically, like everything's a replication crisis. You can't trust anything. And then that got me like all fired up, and then I just went crazy on it. So at the beginning of this, I kind of just like went down like the laundry list of these findings. And so maybe I can just I'll go through these findings really quick, and then if there's anything that I've missed, we can talk about, or any particular common myths or misconceptions we can talk about more. But so basically, okay, so the idea is that like, okay, and when it comes to the science of learning, like, okay, that there are quite a few findings, especially like psychology, that don't hold up. There's a replication crisis, but at the same time, there are many findings that do. And so the challenge is just separating out like, okay, what are the things that it's like, okay, there's something that's never been heard of before, and it sounds weird, and somebody published a paper on it, and how well can you trust it? Like, okay, probably not very much. But if there is something that has been replicated over and over for decades or even a century, like, that's a different situation. And there are many things in the science of learning that have been replicated like that. And so I'll just go down the list of these things. So I'm going to start with the most obvious ones, but get down into the less obvious ones. Cool. So first of all, actively solving problems produces more learning than passively watching a video or lecture or rereading notes. And so this is pretty obvious. It's also been tested scientifically numerous times, completely replicable, might as well be a law of physics at this point. So active learning beats passive learning. Now, I should say one nuance is this: is active learning doesn't mean that students never watch and listen. It just means that students are actively solving problems as soon as possible, following a minimum effective dose of explanation. And they spend the vast majority of their time actively solving problems. So active learning does not mean unguided learning. But it was just common misconception. But okay,
I'll add one quick thing to that. I noticed Math Academy doesn't have any videos, which I think is just like it's very deliberate, and it just in keeping with this. It's all problems based.
Yeah. So actually, something interesting about that no videos is that when I first came on with Math Academy, I was actually developing tutorial videos. We used to have some videos, and what we realized is just that they were not as helpful as we thought they would be for students, because what typically happens when a student watches a video is they click play on the video and then they look at it, but they're not actually like thinking about it. They're just kind of staring into the screen, thinking that they're watching, and then they're sort of watching the pen move around, but they're not, like, it's just kind of bypassing the critical thought of what's going on, and so also the videos are also hard. They're kind of hard to refine over time. We refine all of our content. We do content analytics whenever like some knowledge point in our scaffolding sequence for a lesson, whenever there's a alarmingly large drop off rate where people fail the lesson at that point, we then split that up, and we're always tweaking our content and refining and improving it. But with videos, it's like, well, that's harder.
Yeah,
that's a lot harder to do. It's hard enough to edit the video in the first place. But okay, yeah. So going down the line with more. So next finding is, okay, if you don't review information, you're gonna forget it, and you can model this precisely mathematically using a forgetting curve. And so that's basically a law of physics. The only real difference is that we've gone up several levels of scale, and we're dealing with noisier stochastic processes. And so there's a number of other findings that are just as well replicated as these obvious things, but are less obvious. And so the first one is kind of related to this, like, you need to review things, and it's called the spacing effect. Anyone who knows about spaced repetition is familiar with this, but just to state it, it's the idea is that the idea is that more long-term retention occurs when you space out your practice, even if it's the same amount of total practice. And so basically, you can if you're going to practice for 3 hours on something, like, if you're only going to practice 3 hours like this week, don't do it all today. Like, spread it out. Do like just spread it out over multiple days. And actually, the more you practice a particular skill, the longer you can go before you need to practice it again. And so it's kind of like the thing that really increases your memory retention of the thing that you're doing is having to recall it when it's fuzzy. That's a skill that you're training. You're not training just doing the thing. You're training overcoming some challenge to do the thing. And so this challenge, one of the types of challenges might be just that you wait a while, let your memory of it decay, and then you pull it from memory. And then this act of waiting is almost like lifting a weight from your memory. So it's like the spaced repetition you're weight lifting, WAIT lifting. And so the more you do this, the more the longer you can go before your memory decays down, because your forgetting has slowed. So the weight, WAIT, the weight duration creates the weight that you're lifting from your brain, and you get better at that. Now, another way that you can make something harder for your brain to retrieve in a good way that like actually increases your ability to retrieve it if you overcome it is called interleaving. It's basically mixed practice, and so that's just the idea that you after you kind of get your arms around this new skill that you're trying to learn, and get some initial, like, kick it off with some initial repetitive, consecutive practice. What you want to do once you get into the more of the like building memory, building review phase is that you want to mix it up with other skills. So it's like after you learn to shoot a basketball from the free throw line, like, okay, you practice that, get to the point where you're hitting baskets, but now start like moving around the court, shooting the basketball. Don't just shoot them all from the same place. Like you want to try to, you want to not make the learning artificial in the sense that like if you're just doing the same thing over and over, you already have the context spun up in your brain. You're not training the movement from having the context already spun up in your brain to doing it. What you're training the movement is pulling that context from memory. So you want to try to like wipe your working memory from that context, do something else, and then come back and have to re-pull what you initially had there. If you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's like really you've done one rep of the thing that you were supposed to do, which is pull from memory, and now you're just like using it over and over. It's already there. But of course, that's after you've built up some initial proficiency with the thing. Because the first goal is just to get yourself to the point where you're able to perform the skill, which sometimes takes repetitive practice at the beginning.
An example would be, it's interweaving, right?
Interleaving with an L.
An example would be like practicing math problems in different contexts, or you learn a jazz scale, and then now you deploy it in like, a jazz ballad, or like maybe like a Latin jazz piece or something. It's like a totally different context, and you bring this like skill that's in your fingers in the new context, and then you're training that, pulling the necessary context with it or something.
So I think that'd be, that could qualify it as an example of it. You do a jazz scale, and then instead of like, you get to the point like, okay, you can play the scale, and now now you're trying to train your ability to play these scales very, very fluently. And instead of playing the same scale over and over and over again, like 50 times in a row, like maybe switch between multiple scales.
Oh yeah.
And the transition. Play one of them like maybe 1 or 2 times in a row, then switch to another one, then switch to another one, switch back to the original one. Like, because you're going to be, now, of course, you're going to be like, well, wait, no, I had it. I was doing it just fine. And then I had to switch, and then you made me mess up. But it's like, well, if that messed you up, you didn't have it down pat.
Yeah.
You thought you did. You thought you did because you had your fingers in the right position. You weren't training all the skills involved in actually playing that scale. And yeah, that's something that happens in math learning all the time too. It's like somebody is taking calculus, for example, and you give them like some limits problems, and they're like, okay, yeah, I think I'm getting this. This is good. And then you change it up, and you're like, okay, now we're going to work on derivatives. And then they're like, okay, fine, derivatives, work on that. And then you bring them back to limits problems, and then they're like, wait, like you made me screw up. You made me forget all my limits stuff because you made me work on derivatives. You made me lose learning. It's like, no. We just exposed the fact that you did not have this learning to begin with. And we're going to help you build it up by making you retrieve it from memory. And you're just complaining because you don't want to lift the heavy weight off the floor.
Yeah.
You just want to hold the weight. You just want to lift it off the rack. Like, no, put it down, lift it back up.
Right.
And so classes often get this wrong all the time. Courses, even if you read a textbook cover to cover, it's probably not going to work out very well, because what often happens is like when you do one unit at a time, you do the unit in full. You're essentially getting massed practice on one thing. Then you develop such comfortable fluency while you're doing mass practice that you think you have the skill. Then you move on to the next unit. You spend like weeks or a month on the next unit, and you have forgotten a lot of the original unit. You're not getting your review on it. You're not doing interleaving. You're just doing another round of mass practice. But because you are not practicing the original skills, you don't realize how shaky you've become on them. You don't realize, that you can't context switch back to them quickly. You don't understand that you have lost that you never really had that learning initially. from unit 1. That was completely artificial, your perception of learning. You move on to unit 2, you're not testing, you're just trusting that unit 1 is still there. It's not. Then you keep moving on to unit 3. You get to unit 10, and by the end of it, like you're like, well, I know this course. I've mastered calculus, and then somebody gives you a limits problem, and then you're like, I should know how to do this, but I don't. And then it's like a kind of rude awakening. So you really want to be like interleaving, almost going breadth first through this knowledge graph, not depth first in one direction and in another direction. You want to go breadth first, layer by layer by layer.
Yeah.
And this also helps you build kind of connections, layering on new skills that pull together a wide variety of lower level skills. You're going to form more mental connections in what you're learning when you go this kind of breadth first route.
This is like Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Yeah, that's Hebb's law. Yeah, right. Yeah,
and you have multiple
and the idea
pathways
is
to the insight, the original thing that you're learning, because you took like a broader breadth first approach, so that you can access what you're learning with many more pathways.
Yeah, right, exactly. You got more on your mind that you could potentially form connections to.
Yeah.
When you're doing depth first, you've just got a smaller, volume of area and this knowledge graph that you're covering.
So what's after interleaving?
So okay, after interleaving, there's the testing effect. Then the idea behind that is like, if you want to maximize the amount of memory, if you want to maximize the amount by which your memory is extended when solving review problems, you can't be looking back at the reference material all the time. Unless you are like completely stuck and you can't remember how to proceed. You need to engage in retrieval practice, which is just like, you need to try to pull the memory from your brain unassisted, and you can't be just like by looking at reference material by default. The reference material is like your spotter at the gym. Your spotter can't be lifting the weight for you. If you are like struggling on a rep and you just cannot get the weight up, then the spotter can assist you. But again, still, they should only assist you just enough to help you get the weight up. So in the context of reference material, it's like, okay, so you can't be solving a problem alongside a worked example. Like, you can look at a worked example, but whenever you do, you should be like, okay, read through it. Read through it once at the beginning when you're learning, and then move on to the practice problem, and don't solve the practice problem alongside. Try to solve it independently. Maybe you get to a point where you're like, I cannot remember what to do next. I can't figure it out. Then you flip back to the worked example. Just look at the place where you're getting stuck to remind yourself that just the minimum amount of priming, and then you flip back to your problem, and then you try to solve the rest unassisted. And when you solve review problems, like days later or weeks later, you want to solve those review. Don't prime yourself by going back for a pre-review on the lesson by like looking back at it, because that's cold. Robbing you. Yeah, go in cold. Try to recall as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, so these are the main ones. I think there's master learning the prereqs, spaced repetition. The testing effect or the retrieval practice effect, and interleaving or mixed practice. There's a bunch of other things like gamification elements and other like more technical like non-associative interference. The idea that you should try to avoid learning a bunch of really similar things on the same day. Like if you're learning trigonometry, like don't learn. Don't try to cover all like 5 different trig identities on the same day, because those are going to get mixed up in your head. Maybe like do some ideally do one trig identity, and then maybe do some algebra and some geometry. Again, like breadth first, minimize the interference between all these new concepts that you're learning. But I mean, these are pretty much the ones that I talked about just now, that I think the biggest levers here.
That's great. I think you've written about this before, but like one kind of like meta frame for this is so much of learning is really about taking things from short-term memory and then putting it in long-term memory. And then these are all various ways to do that efficiently. And then to then recall it from long-term memory. And it's crazy how direct the analogies are to like fitness and athleticism. And I'm almost like starting to think that a lot of the dysfunction in learning comes from this misapprehension about what the mind actually is. Like we kind of think of like physical work as like different from like knowledge work, but it's all happening in the body. It's all happening with the nervous system. If you just directly draw from what it takes to build a good physique in the gym, it'll get you like pretty far when it comes to, learning math or something like that. And so that's just kind of an interesting takeaway for me.
Yeah. At a fundamental level, I think it's, upskill, climbing a skill tree, any skill tree, whether it's physical, intellectual, whatever. It comes down to retrieving lower level skills. Independently. And there's so many ways that people find to try to cheat this process and try to convince themselves that they're executing these skills independently when they're not. But yeah, it all comes down to, like you said, you have to pull information from long-term memory into working memory, and that's the pull that you're trying to train. And you're also trying to form more connections between things in long-term memory. But really, the thing that people screw up is that they don't understand that it's the pull that you're trying to train. It's like you go to the gym and you need to lift the weights. It's lifting them off the ground. You can try to sitting on a bench, scrolling on your phone, texting people like for an hour. That's not working out. And like trying to lift a weight that's like way too heavy and not being able to pick it up and getting 0 reps in for the day, that's not working out. Going to the gym, doing like one rep with a really light weight, that doesn't count as a work. Like if you think, I guess as a general rule, if you think about like when you're learning, like ask yourself, like, if I were doing this, if this were physical exercise in the gym, like what would it look like? Right. And then you can kind of get a sense of whether what you're doing is real or not.
Justin, this has been a really inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? Anything you want to plug?
Well, a lot of the writing that we've discussed is on my site, justinmath.com. And this is a great conversation. It was really fun talking to you. And it's always fun when we have these, just having these conversations where I feel like we went a lot deeper and I realized a lot of even deeper insights to some things that were probably on both of our minds originally. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely got some new takeaways from our conversation.
Awesome.